There are moments in royal history when a single whisper is enough to unsettle an entire institution, and according to growing online chatter, this may be one of those moments. In recent months, speculation has intensified around comments reportedly made by Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, comments that some believe quietly reopened a chapter long assumed buried. Nothing explicit, nothing fully named, but enough to spark questions the palace would rather never hear again. Because if the rumors circulating are even partially accurate, they don't just challenge public perceptions of Meghan Markle, they threaten to redraw the timeline of how her story truly began. And once these kinds of questions surface, they don't simply fade away. For years, Sarah Ferguson has been treated as an outsider to royal power, yet insiders have always known she holds something more valuable than status: memory. As Prince Andrew's former wife, she witnessed his private world in ways few others ever could, and according to royal watchers, she has recently alluded to past entanglements and old stories resurfacing. She didn't name names. She didn't offer dates. But that vagueness is precisely what has fueled speculation online. Because when someone with her proximity speaks carefully instead of clearly, it often signals there's more beneath the surface, and people have started asking why now. To understand why these rumors gain traction, observers say you have to rewind to the early 2000s, long before royal titles and palace gates entered the picture. At the time, Meghan Markle was an ambitious young American, reportedly networking aggressively, moving through elite circles, and chasing opportunity wherever it appeared. This isn't controversial, even her supporters acknowledge she was driven. What's debated is where that drive may have taken her, and whether some early connections placed her closer to powerful figures than anyone realized at the time. One story that refuses to stay buried involves a private yacht off the coast of Nice, France, in 2002. Online reports claim Prince Andrew was present during a discreet gathering hosted by wealthy European elites, a detail supported by publicly documented travel records placing him in the region. What enters speculative territory is who else may have been there. For years, internet forums and anonymous accounts have claimed a young American woman attended the gathering, someone confident, outspoken, and strikingly focused on proximity rather than partying. These accounts insist she wasn't there by chance, though no official guest list has ever surfaced. Every rumor gains traction when it includes a witness who doesn't benefit from speaking, and in this case, the online narrative centers on a man identified only by a pseudonym. According to accounts attributed to him, he was not wealthy, royal, or influential, just someone who found himself unexpectedly present. He later claimed he noticed a woman commanding attention well before any royal arrival, speaking openly about ambition, status, and destiny. Whether his account is reliable or exaggerated remains unknown, but it's often cited as the moment speculation moved from gossip to something more persistent. When Prince Andrew allegedly arrived that evening, witnesses claim the tone shifted immediately. Online retellings describe a calculated interaction, not shy or coincidental, but deliberate. According to these reports, the woman many believe to be Meghan positioned herself visibly, confidently, and quickly, closing distance in a way that drew attention. Critics argue this narrative is unfair. Supporters say it's implausible. But what keeps the story alive is that multiple versions, shared independently over the years, describe the same sequence with unsettling similarity. Perhaps the most debated part of the story involves what allegedly happened next. Reports claim Prince Andrew and the woman disappeared from public view for several days during the yacht trip, with staff allegedly instructed to limit access. No photos, no documentation, just accounts passed quietly between people who say they noticed the absence. Those defending Andrew dismiss this as fantasy. Others argue silence itself is what made the story grow legs. Because when powerful people vanish from sight without explanation, questions tend to fill the void. One of the most quoted and contested details involves a remark allegedly made after those days passed, something interpreted by witnesses as more than casual flirtation. Whether this comment was real, exaggerated, or misunderstood is impossible to confirm. But it became symbolic in online discussions, representing a belief that something significant had shifted. For skeptics, It's proof the story is too cinematic to be true. For believers, it's the moment ambition crossed into expectation. What followed, according to speculative accounts, was not confrontation but quiet distance. Messages unanswered. Calls unreturned. Supporters of the royal family say this reflects nothing more than boundaries being enforced. Others argue it suggests something more complicated, an attempt to create distance from a situation that had grown uncomfortable. Regardless of interpretation, silence played a role, and silence often fuels speculation more effectively than denial ever could. This is where the story becomes most sensitive and most contested. Online discussions claim the repeated attempts to reach Prince Andrew were tied to deeply personal news. These claims are entirely unverified and must be treated as rumor, yet they persist because multiple anonymous sources repeat the same theme: urgency. Whether true or false, the idea that private medical matters may have intersected with royal distance added emotional weight to the narrative and changed how people interpreted earlier events. According to speculative accounts, the lack of response left one party feeling isolated and forced into difficult choices. No palace support, no public acknowledgement, just silence. Commentators emphasize that this section of the story cannot be confirmed and should not be stated as fact. Still, its persistence highlights something deeper: how power imbalance shapes outcomes when one side controls access, reputation, and protection. Some of the most controversial rumors involve later health complications allegedly tied to that period. These claims are unproven, deeply personal, and impossible to verify, yet they circulate widely online because they would explain years of silence and avoidance around certain topics. Critics argue this crosses ethical lines. Others counter that public figures inevitably face scrutiny when unanswered questions remain. What's clear is that these rumors, whether true or not, have never been publicly addressed, and that absence continues to speak loudly. Which brings the story back to Sarah Ferguson. Royal observers believe her recent comments landed differently because they arrived at a moment when the monarchy is already strained. She didn't accuse. She didn't deny. She acknowledged history. And sometimes, acknowledgement is enough to confirm people's suspicions that certain chapters were never truly closed. Insiders suggest Meghan is acutely aware of how dangerous resurfacing narratives can be, especially ones tied to figures like Prince Andrew. Whether any part of this story is factual remains unresolved, and it may always remain that way. But history shows that unresolved whispers inside royal walls rarely disappear. They wait. They resurface when timing shifts, when alliances change, when silence grows heavier than speech. If Sarah Ferguson chooses to speak further, or if more voices step forward, the narrative surrounding Meghan's rise could face renewed scrutiny. Not because the past defines the present, but because the past has a way of knocking when least expected. And when it does, even palaces listen.